There's nothing like being in the stands cheering on your favorite team. Game Time is your hack to unlocking amazing tickets in just a few taps. Plus, their Game Time guarantee means you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets at the best price. Fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay. Get the best deals on sports tickets. Download the Game Time app and create an account to start searching for tickets to upcoming games and events. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time.
Hey guys, Matt Halleck here, author of The DNA of a Man. If your marriage feels cold, distant, or stuck, no matter how much you try, it may not be because you're just failing at it. It might be because you were trained into the wrong kind of masculinity. The DNA of a Man gives you the kingdom blueprint to become confident, desirable, and rooted in real masculine authority and identity again. Grab it now. Click the link in the description.
Good morning, Northbound. Welcome back. Last episode, we were talking about a gentleman named Robert Falcon Scott, an Antarctic explorer. And we're going to talk about a different explorer today in contrast with Scott. But Robert Falcon Scott had pushed his people to the South Pole to achieve being the first man to stand at the pole physically. And he pushed his people and he cut corners and he failed to establish a culture that was going to get him there. And he lost people along the way. They died. And when he got to the South Pole, he reached it, but he wasn't the first. He got beat by Roald Amundsen. Antarctica is not a place where people can survive without serious planning and supplies and a team. On this episode, let's talk about a different explorer in contrast, and that is Ernest Shackleton, an Anglo-Irish Antarctic explorer who had led 3 expeditions into the Antarctic. And his plan, because Robert Scott had already gone to the South Pole, had already been beaten, Ernest Shackleton decided he was going to make plans to cross the Antarctic, or the continent of Antarctica, from sea to sea. This was not going to be an easy task. And Ernest Shackleton was known as a consummate leader. And if you've heard that before, this is what it means. It means that he was skilled. He was a masterful leader who knew how to unify the people around him. And he communicated clear purpose. He was authentic, and he had exceptional self-awareness. And those are incredible traits to have as you build a team and lead a team to achieve success. He was great at communicating the why, and he led his team with compassion. So they left South Georgia Island in their ship and sailed down to Antarctica. And as they got closer, they began to cut through the ice. It was thin at first, and then it thickened up. And it got so thick that they would have to get off the ship. The men would get off the ship with these big saws and cut the ice in front of the ship, pushing it with long poles and digging at the ice in order for the ship to go farther. But eventually, the ship could not move and got stuck. And so they took everything they could off of the ship and they built an igloo village that wasn't far from the ship. And that was going to be their starting off point for going across the continent. Now, it had already been crazy by this point. I mean, we are talking about terrible conditions, very challenging and difficult scenario. But Shackleton encouraged them to take time for recreation. They played ball games on the ice, even when their future survival was unknown. And their chance of making it out was very low. They knew that. They were enduring months of darkness. And yet the team had meals together. They played games together, and they enjoyed each other's company. And this was because they had formed a positive team culture led by Ernest Shackleton. And so they waited out the deep South Pole winter. 243 days it had been since they departed for their mission. But that's when things actually got worse, because the ice began to buckle and force its way upward, and the ship was ultimately destroyed by vertical ice that crushed the ship. It began to leak. And so they took everything they could off of the ship, everything that was left, they took it off and to set up a safe camp. But all of that ice around there was unstable. And so they needed to get to an island that was 300 miles away where they could set up an ultimately safer camp. And so they set off for that island. And if you read the words of Shackleton, he spoke with truth, compassion, and inspiration, which was so important for getting them where they needed to go. He writes this: to be brave cheerily, to be patient with a glad heart, to stand the agonies of thirst with laughter and song, to walk beside death for months and never sad. That's the spirit that makes courage worth having. And here's a quote from him that means something to me. He said, people living under civilized conditions, surrounded by nature's varied forms of life and by all the familiar work of their own hands, may scarcely realize how quickly the mind, influenced by the eyes, responds to the unusual and weaves about it curious imaginings like the firelight fancies of our childhood days. When you go on adventures like this, you realize just how numb we get in civilized conditions, surrounded by the work of our own hands. And so much of our time in civilized society is taken up by things that don't matter and ultimately takes our eyes off of the things that do. That's why I believe adventure is so important for leadership. Getting outside of the day-to-day stuff is important for understanding yourself and understanding others and forming a deeper relationship with God. Well, this may sound like a depressing turn of events here for Shackleton, but he doesn't make it across from sea to sea. He does not make it to the pole and then go across the rest of the way. They tried, but it was too difficult, and he would lose men. And that was something he wasn't willing to do. And so they did have to turn back, and they decided to go back to the South Georgia island. But their ship was destroyed. So Ernest Shackleton, with several men, took a rowboat and decided to leave to South Georgia Island to get help. And they were going from Elephant Island, which is in Antarctica. And this is arguably the most dangerous sea journey on record. It took them 14 days in a rowboat to go 780 miles to South Georgia Island. But then when they got to South Georgia Island, they had to hike 25 miles across the island over a mountain range that had never been crossed before. And at that moment, too, Ernest Shackleton had decided that there were some, in each time, so when they were back on at Elephant Island, men stayed there because they didn't have enough rowboats, and also there were some that weren't doing as well as others. So they decided who was going to go on. And so a small group got in the rowboat to go to South Georgia Island with Ernest Shackleton. And then when they got to South Georgia Island and they had to cross 25 miles across, they did another evaluation. And some men stayed behind on that other side of the island while Ernest Shackleton and a couple of men went with him who were doing okay. They were still physically able to do it. And so he takes these men and they press on to get help. And here's the thing about Ernest Shackleton. He never asked anyone to do something that he wasn't willing to do himself. In fact, in every case, he's leading. He's like, all right, we're going to go for help, and I'm going to take you, and you're strong, you're strong, you're strong. We're going to go get help, and we're going to come back for you. We're not going to leave you. They might be leaving them somewhere safe and sound, but they're going to come back for them. And he always told his men the truth. Through the entire expedition, he was always very honest with them about what they were facing. This is what he said before they ever left, and he was recruiting men for this journey. He said, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Here's the difference, though, between Ernest Shackleton and Robert Scott. Ernest Shackleton saw success on the journey and not just in reaching a physical location. And he said, difficulties are just things to overcome. So success happens along the way. And he was very good at showing and encouraging his men as they overcame difficulties. And he showed them their success. Now, one big challenge that came up when they were on their way to the whaling station on the South George Island is that as they were coming over the mountain range and down towards the whaling station, they came across a giant glacier that required them to go back into the mountains and find a different route. Eventually, they reached the whaling station, and they immediately began the preparations to rescue all the men left behind in Antarctica. The men were stranded there for over 2 years before rescue came. But here's the thing, not one man on Ernest Shackleton's team perished. Not one. Success isn't always measured by getting to a certain location. It is about the challenges overcome along the way. And Shackleton wrote this about his journey. We had seen God in his splendors, heard the text that nature renders. We had reached the naked soul of man. Throughout, it was never about him. And that's why he won't be remembered for the first expedition to go across Antarctica. He will be remembered for his leadership. He will be remembered for how he took care of his men and how he rescued or saved everyone and didn't lose anyone. Amidst your successes and your failures throughout your life, how will you be remembered? And how will the people that you lead remember you? All right, I have some homework for you. I want you to go to your workplace, find someone that works for you, and ask them this: how can I better equip you and support you? Ask them. And then I want you to come to the Northbound community at the link that I provide below and tell us how that went. What was the response? Let us encourage you and empower you to lead boldly. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in today to Northbound Podcast. Always glad to have you. Thanks. See ya. You just listened to another episode from the Northbound Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you were encouraged and empowered in leadership. Go lead boldly and humbly. And remember our vision: elevate your team through Christ-centered leadership. If you want to be a part of our community, just go to go-northbound.com and follow the link and come join us. Follow along with courses and live streams and chats, and maybe even join us for an adventure. We'd love to have you. All of those links are in the description below. Thank you again for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. See ya.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.